All right. So, as we were saying at the top of the show, we are at the end of another school year, Ted.
We are.
Your son already in college. Like,
Hmm.
what is he, a sophomore now?
No, he's between junior and senior year.
He's gonna be a senior already.
I
Wow.
know, it's crazy. The wolf is loose.
I'm on the
Beware,
other end of
America.
that.
Another
I'm on the
Rall.
other oh, I know. I'm on the other end of that spectrum. I've got um a kindergarten graduation to
Hmm.
go to
Hmm.
next week, um, end of the school year, and I think kids really need more talking to maybe during the summer about this particular topic that we're bringing our guest on to discuss is about bullying. And I know people. I think it's so unfair that Melania Trump got a lot of flack because she was trying to do that anti-bullying thing the last time. Remember the last go around about like just being kind and being nice to other
Well, I think she
children.
got made fun of because of her husband, who's kind of notoriously a bully. You
I
know,
get that, but that
and
doesn't.
and
But that's not
let me
her.
just say I feel very deeply about this issue. One of my earliest books was My War with Brian, which was autobiographical about my own experience being very seriously bullied in elementary and junior high school. And it honestly changes you, and it's absolutely brutal. And I mean, look, I know things have changed a lot in many ways, but like back when in the 70s when I was going through this, the schools didn't take it seriously at all. They thought it was hilarious. They thought it was a joke. I mean, the teachers
Really?
and the administration, they're like, this was like, boys will be boys. You guys go
Oh,
and
I see.
work it out. It's like, it wasn't viewed as a problem at all. And it was just sort of like, and I mean, we're talking about serious stuff, thrown down the stairs, broken nose,
Wow.
black eyes, all that stuff. But and you were supposed to work, you were supposed to deal with it on your own. It was Lord of the Flies at Dwight
Holy
L.
moly.
Barnes junior high school in Kettering, Ohio. But who's naming
Well,
names?
that much never happened to me. But as I mentioned earlier, um, was that even though statistics show, and I'm going to pop this on screen, this is from stopbullying.gov. So this is an official U.S. government website that says about 19.2% of students ages 12 to 18
Mm-hmm.
enrolled in grades 6 through 12 experienced bullying nationwide during the 2021-2022 school year. This is lower than the prevalence of bullying at the beginning of the last decade during the 2010 to 2011 school year. That was 28%, and lower than the prevalence last measured by the School Crime Supplement during the 2018-2019 school year. So that was pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they say the prevalence of bullying is actually higher in middle school than in high school.
Middle
Middle school
school
coming in
is the lowest
26.3.
circle of hell. It's
Middle,
true.
well, you're still pretty immature at that point. And not that you're mature in high school, but there's a big change, right?
Oh yeah.
So to talk
By the
more
way, I
about
want to just say
this
one quick
particular
point
topic.
about this. Like, so if this is roughly 1 out of 5 kids is the victim of bullying, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. The other kids see that, and even if you yourself are not a victim, if you see someone else being victimized, you're terrorized too because you yourself might become the victim of it.
Right.
So
I mean, the
you know what I'm
definition of
saying?
terrorism, right, is,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, like to
It is
scare a whole
emotional and
population.
social terrorism is what bullying is.
That's right. I think that's right. So to talk more about that, we're going to bring in our guest. His name is Kirk Smalley. He is the co-founder of Stand for the Silent. This Stand for the Silent is a nonprofit organization that started in 2010 with a mission to help eliminate bullying nationwide. Kirk and his wife Laura founded the group after their own son took his life due to bullying. And they offer free resources for parents and educators, and they travel to schools to host these presentations. You've been to thousands of schools, Kirk, talked to millions of kids. You guys can learn more about their work at standforthesilent.org. Kirk Smalley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
So I'm going to put your website up here. First, tell us a little bit about. I mean, I saw the video presentation that's on the website, and it brought me to tears. Um, can you tell the audience a little bit about what you and your wife lived through with the loss of your son? What happened?
Yes, ma'am. Um, Ty was in sixth grade. He was 11 years old, and he was being bullied in school for a little over 2 years. Laura worked at the school that Ty went to. She actually took that job just so she could be near our kid. You know, she wanted to be off work the same days Ty was out of school. She was in the office almost every single day, you know, complaining and telling the administrators, hey, you got to make this kid leave Ty alone, you know. And like Ted said, you know, we got the standard answer all the time. Boys will be boys, kids will be kids. Bullying's just a rite of childhood passage. It's something we all have to go through. And our question was why? Why do we all have to go through that? On the particular day, May 13th, 2010, Ty was in the gym waiting for class to start. And this kid that had been picking on him came up and shoved him. And for the first time in his life, Ty fought back. He turned around and he pushed the kid back. And, you know, it's always the second guy that gets caught. You know, the disturbance draws the teacher's eye. They look over and they see the second guy take the swing. And that's exactly what happened to Ty. He was suspended for 3 days.
Ridiculous.
They called his mama and she went and picked him up and took him home. And they were shorthanded at work that day, and Laura had to go back. And so she told Ty to do his homework and do his chores and told him that we would talk about it when we got home that evening. And Laura came home at 2:38 p.m. on May 13th, and she found out that my boy didn't do none of his homework. He hadn't done any of his chores. Instead, our son had killed himself on our bedroom floor.
Oh my God.
I got a phone.
I'm so sorry.
Me too.
Thank you, ma'am. I got a phone call at 2:39, and it was Laura, so I answered, and you know, she was just screaming. I couldn't understand anything she kept trying to tell me. She just kept screaming, and I guess finally I screamed back at her, and I told her, "Baby, you got to stop. You got to tell me what's going on." And she managed to say, "He's dead. He shot himself."
Oh my gosh, at just 11 years old. I mean,
You know, I actually asked her who, and she said, "Ty." Ever since that day, we've traveled all over this country, all over this world, talking to families and kids that have done that same kind of thing. You know, I actually have a list of over 67,000 children that we have lost in our country in the last 7.5 years to suicide due to bullying. And the
that many
youngest,
children.
yes, ma'am. And the youngest one on that list was a 6-year-old boy.
Oh my God.
You know, suicide has always been kind of a taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. They think that if you talk about it, it's going to bring it into their community.
Social contagion. Yeah, even like as you well know, Kirk, there's the journalists associations actually prohibit you. It's considered unethical to say if a person committed suicide. If you write an article about their death, you just say, and you can sort of see, they died, and like if they're younger,
It's very vague.
say 60, they passed away, whatever. And I'm like, but it's crazy. You're journalists, and you're not telling the truth.
Ted, the only way we're ever going to stop this from continuing is if we learn to talk about it. You know, 1 out of 4 of our children in America right now will have a plan on how they would take their own life before they graduate from high school. 25% of our babies. Now, my
I did.
boys' school
I
had
totally did.
1,400 kids in the district, and that comes out to 350 children in one school district that would have a plan on how they would take their own life before they graduate high school. And these babies think that they're the only ones that have ever had this problem and have ever had these thoughts. They think they're all alone in this. Nobody gets it. Nobody understands. They don't realize that 1 out of 4 of their own classmates have these same thoughts and these same
Wow.
problems. And the only way that we stop this from happening anymore is if we learn to talk about it. We can talk it out. We don't have to act it out. That's one of the things we teach these kids. We give every single one of them a wristband that glows in the dark that says, I am somebody. You're not alone. We can
Do
talk.
you do you think Ty felt that he was alone in this? Do you know if he had talked to his friends or I mean, we saw you said that the school really kind of shirked it off as if it was nothing real important, but do you know if his circle of friends knew?
I don't think that anyone knew that he actually thought about taking his own life. I believe that in my heart, I believe that it was an impulsive thing. He fought back. I had tried to tell him all his life, hey, mom and I can't always be there. Sometimes you're going to have to take up for yourself. And the one time that he finally did, he got in trouble for it. I think that broke him.
Do you think he was worried that he'd be in trouble with you guys too? Or, I mean, just because you hadn't had a chance to talk to him yet? Or,
I don't believe that he, he thought that he was going to be in trouble for it.
but just being in trouble at school?
He did get in trouble at school, and I think that was what broke him. He finally did what I had told him to do, and then it,
Fight back.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
and I'm speculating here. There were no notes. There was no. I don't know for sure what
You'll
was
know, and
running
that's
through
part
my
of the
boy's
torture,
head.
is that you'll never know.
And that's part of the problem. There's so many questions for parents that lose kids to suicide. And, my heart goes out to anyone that has ever lost a child for anything, a car wreck, a disease. My heart truly goes out to them. When you lose a child to suicide, it's a whole different animal. You blame, who do you blame? You can't blame a car wreck. You can't blame a disease. You blame yourself. Why didn't I see this? What did I miss? What else could I have done? And you live with that for the rest of your life. I watched this kill my wife. Laura died November 14th of 2020. They said it was a brain aneurysm, and my girl died of a broken heart.
oh, I'm
I know
so
that.
sorry,
I
Kirk.
watched it.
I'm so sorry. My own mother actually survived a neuroaneurysm by the grace of God, and they had told me that she was going to be a vegetable, and just by God's grace, honestly, there's I have a whole story about how I firmly believe the hand of God was at play, but miraculously, my mom is still here after this happened in 2011 or 2012. Um, but I can only imagine what you went through, after it's two
You know, that's
losses. So I'm
that's ironic
so
because my
sorry.
mother was 90 years old um, when Laura passed, and 3 or 4 months after Laura's aneurysm, my mom had one in the same location, and she went through the surgery, and she was fine. She lived another 4 years. Um,
Holy cow, in her
so
90s?
I get that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's depending on where you are with faith or whether or not you're secular, there we find different um different ways of reconciling. And I think maybe I'm nobody to give advice to you, obviously, but I do hope that you don't blame yourself, because it seems like you and Laura were two parents. I mean, your wife went to work at the school so she can be near your boy and
Yeah, it's
hopefully
obviously not,
intervene.
and it's not your
So
fault,
it's not
obviously.
like you guys weren't involved parents. I mean, I think that's step number one, right? For the parents of the children that are being bullied, is you have to be more involved and you have to listen, which it sounds like you and Laura did. So I would first start there by saying, please don't, you and your wife did what you could, but here I think there was a failure in the school system, and I think that's probably a major area of a blind spot for the school system, that I've had already. I'm an active mother. I'm a very involved mommy. He's my one and only child. I started late. I don't think there's going to be another. I've put everything into this one, and I'm very involved at school. I'm a very outspoken, annoying mom at school. Um, and from my experience, the schools like to think they know better, and you can't tell them nothing. Um, but that still doesn't shut me up. Is that something you would advise other parents? Because I would advise other parents, speak up to the schools. If you don't feel what the school is doing is adequate, speak up, be that squeaky wheel. Don't be afraid to tell those school administrators, because they work for you. They're public schools, they work for you. Your tax dollars fund them. You stand up for your kid at the school, just like the way Laura did. The school didn't, obviously, brushed her off.
Yes, ma'am. And I do believe we have to advocate for our children wholeheartedly, but we also have to do it in the proper manner. You know, you want to be mama bear, you want to protect your cub, your baby. And so you walk into the principal's office or the counselor's office and you say, look, by God, this kid's been picking on my daughter or my son for a year and nobody's done anything about it. And immediately when you do that, a wall gets thrown up. They go on the defense. And so
Hmm.
we have to do that in the proper manner. We have to walk in and with the attitude, how can we work together
Hmm.
to make this stop and to solve this? And we're going to get more action and reaction from our school administrators if we go in with that attitude. Because once you start firing off on them, they're going to go on the defense, and that's where the
You
problem
do have to have, I mean,
can.
you do have to have sympathy, I mean, empathy for the school administration and for the teachers, right? I mean, they have their hands full. My mom was a teacher for her entire life. It's like they are expected not only to educate children, but they're supposed to discipline them, keep them under control. In many school districts, feed them, try to monitor whether there's a situation on the home front, look out for police them for criminal activity. I mean, basically, they're all things to all people. They're not earning big salaries. They're overworked. Their class sizes are constantly increasing. And, and then sometimes it's not really the best and the brightest who are in education anymore because the salaries are so bad. And so it's really, the problem is that, like, when a parent comes to the school and says, hey, listen, my kid has this situation, they're like, you're going to get this, whether they say it or not, silently, there's the sigh like, oh God, something else I have to deal with. And it just goes on top of the pile. I mean, it's hard for everybody.
And we're expecting schools to help raise our children. And part of
That's
the
it.
problem here is the last several generations in our world have been brought up by social media, the
Mm-hmm.
internet. We've lost the ability to communicate with our kids. One of the things I do when I do an open to the public evening presentation in a community, I'll ask the parents that attend, how many of you ask your kid every day how your day was? And the hands go up by the hundreds. And I'll say, and then what do they say? Well, it was fine. It was good. It was okay. And then what? Well, they go to their room and they get on their computer or iPad,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
That's not communicating with our kids. I was at a restaurant the other night grabbing dinner on as I was traveling back from my school presentation, and I saw a mom, a dad, and two children sitting at a table, and every single one of them was doing this. Their fingers just flying. They weren't even
Yeah.
talking. You
Hmm.
know, our kids have grown up watching cartoons like South Park, where Kenny dies in every episode, and he comes back tomorrow. Now, Ted, what did that just teach that child? That death ain't real, life's cheap, you come back tomorrow. They played video games where they get points for killing people.
Hmm.
Like that's a good thing. They've watched movies all their lives where somebody gets an arm ripped off and blood and gore and that
Hmm.
numbs them.
And nothing happens. Like, yeah, like in
Right.
like I remember the first time I read that someone I'd read about there's a news story here in New York where there was a bar fight and there was one punch thrown, and the victim, who was an able-bodied young man, died just from the one punch thrown. And I remember thinking, you can die from just being punched once in the face? Of course you can. Now I know that really well. But I mean, the movies don't reinforce that message at all, right? Everybody takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Um, it's a joke, right? And these are impressionable young minds. They're not your brain doesn't start to be fully formed till you're 25. Your judgment center isn't formed. The impulsivity, one of the reasons that suicide rates are so high among people under 25 is they're not really fully cognizant of what it means to be dead, of mortality. Like you're going to be gone. People are never going to see you again. They're going to be destroyed. You're going to be gone. That no one will ever, you'll never be seen again. That's like just something that, I mean, we need. I don't. I mean, we can't uninvent the iPhone. I would, if I could. But I mean, but what? I mean, I'm really glad that you brought up the social media component here, right? Because when I was bullied in junior high school and in elementary school, like Manila and I were talking about earlier, I was bullied in front of a few other kids, or maybe a classroom full of kids. Um, but it's like now, if I were to be humiliated on the internet, it's literally the entire planet, 211 countries that can read this. And I'm not sure how aware kids are about the global nature of the internet, because sometimes you get the impression they don't really understand that. But still, it would just seem like it's codified, it's been published, it's permanent, it's big, it's impossible to like erase. Like you can't get it taken down once. Even if it's on Snapchat, people cut and paste it. It's like, so what? How do we take that on? It just seems like it's even hard. It's getting worse and harder.
It is. Cyberbullying has increased over 75% since the pandemic began. And, we grew up without social media. We don't realize the impact that it truly does have on our children.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have told me, and we didn't have internet when Ty passed, we live out in the middle of nowhere and we didn't need it. We had our own thing going, and if you would have told me that Ty was being bullied on Facebook, I would have said, get rid of Facebook, problem solved. But it actually compounds the issue, because now he walks into the school on Monday morning and everybody's pointing and laughing and he doesn't know what's been
Mm-hmm.
posted online.
Information
Kids
is
are smart.
power.
They can use Photoshop. They can snap a picture with their phone walking down the hallway and Photoshop it, make it look like you're doing anything they want you to be doing, and run your life with the click of a button. And like you say,
Right. AI.
they can get to feeling bad about that. Oh, well, maybe I should take that down. But it's out there forever. It never truly goes away. Someone's seen it, someone saved it, someone shared it.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there
Yep.
forever. And you know, we actually built a whole new website. A couple of years ago, we launched it. It's called socialbullets.org. We had a large marketing firm called Area 23. They're worldwide. They donated $500,000 worth of work to this project of ours.
Wow.
And what we
Nice.
did was we created an algorithm that tracked cyberbullying across all the social media platforms for 24 hours. And we found out that every 238 times a child was cyberbullied, one of them tried to take their own life.
Jesus
And
Christ.
so we had their artists draw 4 different posters depicting 4 different types of cyberbullying: age shaming, race shaming, body shaming, and sexual orientation. And then we took a group of high school kids and their parents, and that's standforthesilent.org, not .com.
Oh, thank you.
We took a group of high school kids and their parents, and we put them in a large auditorium, and we started this algorithm, and they would see the post pop up for um, from Snapchat or Facebook that's, Bill told Sally, you're ugly, nobody likes you, you're fat, you're stupid, you should just kill yourself, and that kind of thing. And we caught their reaction to these posts on the video or on video. And every time we reached the number 238, we fired a live bullet at one of those posters at a shooting range.
Oh man.
And we caught their reaction to the bullets firing and hitting the targets. And then we interviewed them afterwards and got their take. How did this make you feel? What did you feel? What did you learn from this? We couldn't very well define the problem without having a solution. So we built a downloadable guide for anyone that wants it, parents, students, teachers, administrators, anybody, that teach them what to do if they're being cyberbullied, how to fight back against it. And that's on that website. It's also on our Stand for the Silent website. So cyberbullying it's become atrocious, and kids are getting online younger and younger and younger. I've seen first graders that got smartphones.
Oh yeah.
And parents, if your kid is on social media, you better be on their friends list. If they're on Facebook, you better be on Facebook following them and watching what's going on. It's not that we're trying to control our children, but it is our responsibility to take care of them and to monitor what they're doing, because, the internet can be great for getting a message out. We use it a lot with Stand for the Silent to get our message out and communicate with communities, schools, students, staff, parents. But it can also be a bad place. There are predators out there. And
there sure are. Kirk, let me ask you about, on this show, we often talk about legislative solutions. I want to ask you both about legal and legislative things. So, as you know, in some cases, not a lot, there's been, the bullies have been prosecuted after a situation like this. And have even been sent to prison. And also I'm wondering what you think of that. I'm also wondering what you think of, do you think there's a congressional solution? Is there a way to hold, this drives me crazy. You mentioned Facebook. I feel like if Facebook has content that it should not have, let's say, that's being used to bully, and I'm not going to specify what, but there's been examples, for example, politically, of people being doxxed and then later assassinated by their political enemies on Facebook. You should be able to call on a phone and 1-800 number. You should be able to call 1-800-Facebook and get through to a human being 24/7, no wait, and they get on and they find it and they, bam, it's gone. Instead of this, like, well, you can flag it and hope that at some point, maybe they'll get around to, it really should, I feel like that level of customer service should be required under federal law with strict sanctions for companies that refuse to do it. These are major, Facebook has a bigger market capitalization than General Motors. They can afford to hire people here in the United States to man those phones, but they don't want to. I don't know. What do you think?
I love that idea. That's the first I've ever heard anyone mention that, and I think that is amazing. Right now, Facebook, if you report something, things are done by bots. They're not a human looking at that. It's not a human being looking at the thing. They go off a certain terminology, certain words, maybe an image, and it's a bot that takes care of that. And having an actual person that would look and say, "Oh yeah, that ain't going to work for us," that would be great. Guys, I pretty much I watched the first part of your show where you guys were talking politics, and first and foremost, our organization does not get involved in politics because if I'm a conservative, I lose the liberals. If I'm a liberal, I lose the
Mhm.
conservatives. And if we don't get involved in religion, I
Smart.
am a God-fearing man, and I believe there is something after this, but that's my personal because if I'm Baptist, I lose the Catholics, and if and,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're never going to
Can't
please
win.
everybody exactly. So
sure.
we don't get involved with politics or religion, but I we had lawmakers in the state of Oklahoma when Ty passed uh, approach, and they wanted to pass a bill to to help parents and schools and kids that were being bullied, and we spent a lot of time working with them, and they said, what would you like to see in something like this? And we told them several different items,
Hmm.
and by the time they got done chopping and cutting and messing around, it looked nothing at all like
Yeah.
what was needed. you know I do believe that there needs to be some type of legislation to help give parents some power to help make this stop, instead of just getting those standard answers that we've heard. But I also don't believe that laws are ever going to stop bullying in our country or in our world. I mean, we
Right. I
do
agree.
have laws pretty much against a lot of things.
Sure.
It's illegal to rob a bank, and banks still get robbed. You
They
know,
That's
do.
right. Drunk
That's true.
driving. We're not supposed to drink and drive, but that still happens, right?
but
People still do.
I do think we need, maybe it's time we start hitting the parents of bullies in their pocketbook where it actually hurts. If your kid's reported as bullying someone, maybe you get fined $100 or $150, and the second time it happens, you get double that, and the third time it happens, we triple it, and then the fourth time it happens, maybe you're going to have your child expelled or suspended
Right.
for a period of time, and you're going to have to deal with them. You know, we got
Right.
to wake the
Although that
parents
opens
up.
up, yeah, that's the
You know,
thing. Legislation's hard, right? I mean,
And it gets messy.
I had friends who their parents and their kid was in basically involved in bullying, and it wasn't their fault. They were heartbroken, and they were trying to do everything possible to be like cut it out. Um, and they were an
Because their kids
impossible,
were little jerks.
yeah, they were in an impossible situation, and they were poor,
So,
and they
well,
I
well,
don't know.
how about that, Kirk? I mean, how are there any programs that you've seen from all the schools you've traveled to that I don't know how to frame it. Maybe like a way to reform these kids who are being the bullies, the kids that are the jerks and being mean to other children. Are there programs to reform these little punks?
to my knowledge, there's not anything that I've seen that would effectively do that. One of the things that we do in our presentation, I get messages by the thousands from kids that have seen our presentation. I get messages from kids that I talked to 14 years ago that say, I'm now a school counselor. I
That's
saw
Wow.
awesome.
you when I was in eighth grade, and I want to bring your presentation to my students.
That's
I'm
so
now
cool.
a school resource officer, and I saw you when I was in high school, and I want to bring you here and speak to my kids. And I get messages from those kids that say, I'm that one in four. I was going to kill myself until I heard you speak, and now I'm not, and I want to help you make it stop. But I also get messages from bullies that
Hmm.
say, I never realized
Hmm.
that what I was doing could cause this. And Mr. Smalley, I'm done. I'm going to change. I want to help make this stop. We do allow schools and communities to start active chapters of Stand for the Silent in their school. It's free, it's easy. There's a place on our website that they can actually download a packet on how to do it. We have national chapter liaisons that work with our chapters. They send them resources. They give them, best practices, ideas, things that are working in other schools, things that aren't working. Hey, nobody's had any luck with this, and no sense trying to reinvent the wheel here. That kind of thing. And so it's all about awareness. Our kids are surrounded by bullying in our world. You alluded to it earlier in the first part of your podcast. Bullying is in our politics. It's
It is.
rampant in our politics.
It's in our foreign
It's in
policy.
our workplaces.
Yeah.
It's in our sports.
It's in our culture.
It's in our culture, and it's in our homes. Of course, it's going to be in our schools. Bullying is a learned behavior. Bullying can be unlearned. I've spoken to a lot of Native American tribes. I've been all over the country. I do a lot of presentations at various reservations and stuff. And I've noticed that in the Native American culture, there's a lot of, I call it family generational bullying. Grandma and grandpa bullied this family, so mom and dad have bullied them too. And now it's my turn to bully their children. And if we can break that cycle for one kid, one generation, think of the impact that would have down through the course of time.
I mean, it does feel like,
That's a good point.
do you feel that there's been, social media thing has, of course, obviously made things much worse, and I do think there's the toxic influences that you mentioned. I agree with everything you just said, 100,000,000%. Do you think that there's been any improvement though? I feel like at least in some districts, maybe many districts and school districts, they're less tolerant. The boys will be boys thing is not as common, right? It's kind of like we're not putting up with this.
I have seen a lot of change over the 15 years that I've been doing this. Ty's been gone 5,503 days. And I've missed him every second of every single one of those days.
Sure.
And, one of the things I see also, though, is we have to get school administrators to take this serious. And part of the problem, I think, and this is just a theory, there's no scientific proof of any of this. A lot of our school administrators are bullies.
No,
I've seen it.
they themselves.
When you're in high school and you are being picked on, school is not a good place. It's not somewhere that you want to be. It's not some place that you want to come back to when you graduate and make a career out of. It's an awful place, and you want to get as far away from that as
Right.
possible. When you are a bully in high school, you feel like I'm the king, I'm the boss, this is my domain.
Right.
And so you want to make a career in that field. You want to be back in that. And if you have a bully as an administrator, you're going to have a bullying problem in your school because it becomes an acceptable behavior.
Wow.
And
That's
I have
interesting
seen that. I went to
never
a
thought of
school
that.
here in Oklahoma one time, and I had walked in the door. I was headed towards the school office to check in to do my presentation. And the school principal come marching down the hallway and met me. And he said, didn't say hello, hi, how are you? He said, we don't have a bullying problem. Okay. Well, first and foremost, and I didn't tell him this, but every school I've ever been to, large or small, New York City, LA, Chicago, little bitty town out in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, has bullying going on in their school. I said, okay. I said, then why am I here? And he said, well, a parent of ours kept complaining that we needed to bring you in. And so to shut them up, we brought you in. And I said, okay, well, since I'm here, even though you don't have a bullying problem, I said, how about if I do my presentation and we be proactive so you don't get a bullying problem? And he said, ooh, I like that idea. And so we went into the gymnasium and we got set up, and I was training the 3 student helpers that helped me do the presentation. This man was very, I don't know what word I'm looking for. He wanted to be in charge of everything. when the students started filing in to sit down on the gym floor, he literally told each one, you sit here, you sit here, you sit here. I mean, and he set a chair in the middle of the gym and he sat it in. He had fifth grade on one side, sixth grade on the other. During the presentation, one of the things I ask is, how many of you have ever been picked on? Out of 400 children, I bet 300 of them had their hand in the air. And I watched this man's face as he went,
Wah, wah.
and he didn't have a bullying problem in his school.
Not that
So
he
he's
wanted
got
to
it
admit.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
You
so
know,
can I go backwards to Ted's statement about, in the old days it was boys will be boys, and this is how school administrators kind of chalked it all up to just this is boys being boys. According to stopbullying.gov, the government's website on bullying, it says nowadays the prevalence of bullying is primarily on girls
Mm-hmm.
these days. That it has shifted. That back maybe in our day in the 80s and before that, it was mostly boys, but nowadays because of cyberbullying, the incidence rate is so much higher with girls,
Mm-hmm.
especially because now it's not girl on girl bullying anymore. There are high school boys, especially bullying girls by, for example, these AI images with the girl's face on it, and then those girls end their lives. And that's another thing, is it seems like people are taking more drastic children I should say children are taking drastic action as compared to, let's say, the 1980s and even the 1990s. Why do you suppose we're seeing this shift, that it's becoming girls getting more bullied and kids taking this drastic response?
yeah, I think a lot of that is social media, the internet, that type of thing, technology. Back in the day before we had social media platforms, bullying was usually a physical thing or rumors
Mhm.
starting and things like that. And
Mhm.
if you bullied me, we might go out behind the gym and just take care of that problem.
Right.
Um, and Now social media has allowed girls to get a lot more. I don't know what term I want to use, catty, that kind of thing. I believe that communication is key with our children to stop it. Um, you know, Monitoring our social media usage, and there are tools for parents out there that we offer to help them do that. There's an app called Bark that parents can put on their children's cellular device, and it monitors their social media presence, and it alerts parents if their kids being bullied on Facebook or whatever, or actually being the bully. Because we've all heard,
Wow.
little Timmy would never do such a thing. He's an angel, but Timmy just told Sally on Facebook, you're worthless and nobody likes you and you should just kill yourself. And when parents see that with their own eyes, I do think that there's a show that came out years ago called Mean Girls, that
Mhm.
tells a lot about that. You know, I see more prevalence of bullying in the middle years, like middle school, junior high school. I have a
Right.
theory on that as well. I think that, when kids are in high school, they're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. They're starting to get after school activities. They've got, maybe an after school job. They're thinking about going, furthering their education, that type
You
of
got a
thing.
car.
Yeah, and when kids are in middle school, junior high, school is their world. That's all they know. And most of the kids they hang out with during school year, they hang out with that during the summertime as well. And if they're being ostracized or bullied or picked on in that environment, then that just crashes their whole world, and they're crushed by that.
Yeah, this is I feel like, since we are at the end of the 2024-25 school year, I thought it would be a great time actually for, because I know there's no kids, there's no teenagers watching our program, right? But there are parents that are watching. And like you said, little Timmy's an angel. He would never do that. Um, I would say again to all the parents out there to check yourself and check your kid again, that that who your kid presents himself or herself to be to you may not be who they are at school. There could be a completely different identity. And God knows I presented one way at school, but I had a little devil horns pop up when mom and dad weren't looking. So for me, my parents didn't know I was a little monster, but
There's
And
also
another thing, we really need to do is, you know, a lot of children that are being bullied, they will stop telling you about it.
mm,
Because if you go to the school and complain and the bully gets called into the office, then and gets in trouble or whatever happens to him, then they come back with a vengeance and it gets
mm,
worse. So a lot of
Mm,
kids quit talking about it. And so it's important again to communicate with our children, ask those hard questions. Don't settle for my day was fine, it was okay.
right.
also,
What
there's a
good
third
thing happened?
parties here, and I think this is a really important thing. It came up on one of Manila's illustrations here that she put up. Uh, there's the audience. Bullying usually has an audience, often has an audience. It's not usually one on one. It's not always one on one,
That's
and
true.
and
And
and it's for an audience, right? And like
The
it,
bullies like that.
but all it really takes is for one kid to break the spell and to step in and say, "Hey, stop that. Leave him alone. Leave her alone." And that can and it does happen. And when it
Right.
happens, it's incredibly powerful. And it has an exponential message because it's not just about ending that one act. It's about sending a message like, oh, in this society, we don't tolerate that. And
Right. That I
and
was
I think
actually
that's
that
really
heckler.
important to spread that message.
I was actually that heckler growing up. I was always the kid. I mean, sure, people. I mean, I was a kid in the '80s, and I got the one Asian family in basically East LA. I got the whole ching chong and all of that stuff. For me, the just God imbued me with a certain type of personality and attitude that only made me angrier and more. I had more desire to fight back, rather than turn the other way and harm myself, right? I went in the other direction.
yeah,
Um, and I stood up for other kids I mean, this is when I was very small. And then by the time I got to high school, I was a cheerleader. I was class president. I was all of these, ASB chair, just all this stuff. And I ended up being that kid that would heckle. If I saw bullying, it was not going to happen under my watch. I'm this small little Asian girl, and I would bust in, boy or girl, because that I knew that was the right thing to do because I had been bullied as a little kid in elementary school. And these numbers that we only measure from 6th grade to 12th grade. What about all the little kids? I mean, I was a little kid being bullied, but then, whatever happened in my life, and I don't know, maybe it was puberty or something, but by the time we got to high school, I was among the popular kids. I was a cheerleader and all that stuff, and I spoke up. And that's really, to Ted's point, all it takes is for one kid, one kid to speak up and break that spell and break that audience and be the heckler to that bully. And you know what I did in high school, Kirk, when I was public relations chair of the student body, uh, I I put together this thing called the Freshman Senior Buddies Program. And what it was I was a cheerleader, so I went around getting all my cool football player friends and other athlete friends, all the cool boys that are seniors, to sign up to be the senior buddy. And I went to the freshman class president and said, we need to get all the nerds, all the people that are outcasts, all the people that feel alone, that feel like they're bullied, everyone that you would put in the umbrella of being a dork. Let's bring them together with the cool big football players and make them their little buddies. And this is going to prevent bullying. And that from there on, I mean, all we had to do was influence them with some Taco Bell and some time out of class if you sign up for this program. And sure enough, voila, it was like the magic year. There was like no bullying between senior boys and freshman boys. There was somehow kind of peace at the school. I don't know if my high school continued that program. I after I graduated high school, I never really looked back, but I thought, a program like that would be very helpful to kids, especially when they enter the ninth grade.
Yeah, I've actually seen like elementary schools that have implemented a thing called Buddy Bench, and it's out on the playground. And if you don't have anybody to play with, or feeling alone, you go sit on the bench, and if
That's cool.
anybody that sees you sitting there is supposed to go over there and, hey, come on, come with us, and that's been pretty effective, but
That's wonderful.
yeah, the fact that Ted brought up about, speaking up, getting the bystanders involved is critical. There's more bystanders than there are bullies, and there's more bystanders than there are victims of bullying. And I can't remember the exact percentage. It was in the 90s. When one bystander stands up and says, "Hey, stop, leave him alone," high percentage of the time, bullying stops within 10 seconds. That doesn't mean the same kid isn't going to be bullied by the same guy tomorrow, but it stops this time within 10 seconds. And that's so important. Far too often our kids they'll grab that phone and they want to video the fight or the bullying incident so that they can post it on Facebook and become Facebook famous for 10 minutes, hoping it goes viral.
Right.
Instead, we got to get those bystanders to say, "Hey, quit, leave him alone." And that it lets the bully know that your actions are not acceptable and we don't approve of it. And you're playing to an audience that doesn't approve of that thing. But it also lets the victim alone know that they're not alone.
That's right.
And that somebody does care out there.
And those videos should not be allowed to be posted on social media either. Those companies should take them down.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Literally, I came across one this morning logging into the YouTube, and it was like, well, what's this? And I was like, oh my God. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think your message is so important, and we appreciate. We didn't mean to talk your ear off for this long. We didn't book you for a full hour, so we appreciate you giving us so much of your time, because it is a very important topic. And I think with us going into the summer, I think all the parents that are watching really should re-examine whether their kid is on one side of this bullying issue or the other. Talk to their kids, whatever it is, because kids are taking these drastic measures to end the bullying. The drastic measure is potentially losing your own kid. And I think a lot of parents it's such a horrible thing to imagine that parents don't ever even want to think about it. So they never address it, and they never really give it the weight of consideration that it deserves. And I think now that we're going into the summer months, now's a good time, because the kids aren't in the hallways. The kids aren't, they're not going to be faced with their peers. It's summertime. So now's probably a good time for all the parents watching to actually consider talking.
It's not just one end of the spectrum or the other either. It's not whether your kid's being bullied or being a bully. We've got to reach those middle kids too. It's important. All kids need this message. And as parents, we have to set that example.
It's the individual losses, of course. The individual loss of people like your son is, of course, the worst part. But it also, blows up families. It blows up communities. I mean, even imagine the guilt that some bullies must feel after they, are the prompt for someone to take their own life. I mean, that's going to be decades of therapy right there. It's an atomic bomb in our society, and we've got to defuse it. I mean, it's long overdue. And let me just say, a lot of cultures don't have this problem the way America does. I mean, it's not the human condition. We can undo this.
Yeah, this is very, very distinctly an American culture problem. Like we all agreed, bullying is part of America's culture, and it's
Part of
baked
Anglo-Saxon
into.
culture in particular. But it's not like, I
Yeah.
mean, look, it happens all over the world.
It happens all over the world,
but
obviously, but
still.
this it's not this prevalent. It is a epidemic in America, and
We actually
it's
have
horrible.
we actually have chapters in 18 different countries right now. Bullying happens everywhere. It's
Sure.
it's all around us, guys.
Yeah, I think obviously with the advent of social media
I mean,
and
look, the president of France just got hit on international television by his wife. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
bullied by his wife.
and everyone's making jokes about it.
Yes. Like we talked about, Ted and I considered that spousal abuse, what we saw. Not
It is.
Yeah, not a joke. I
It's
mean,
not a joke.
it's that's because
They actually made jokes about Ty killing himself the day after he did that at his school.
oh my
Um,
God.
His
Disgusting.
best friend got the living daylights pounded out of him because he heard those jokes and went up and tried to defend my kid. So yeah, it's not a laughing matter.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, this is why it should be discussed openly and candidly, and we appreciate your strength. I mean, I can't imagine. I know it's been a lot of years for you, and I can't imagine the pain that you'll have forever. And I appreciate you
Thank
coming
you,
on here and speaking about it. It's hard for me to hold back because I'm a mom too. So
I
thank
appreciate
you so
y'all helping me
much.
spread a message.
Kirk. We really
Thank you,
appreciate.
Kirk.
We really appreciate you and your message. Keep doing it. Thank you. We need you.
Gonna try.
If there's anything we can do to help, let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.